I'm Stephen Falk. And this is, obviously because it's my YouTube channel, right? This is my guitar shop. I feel like Martin Mull. I just need a cheap couch and a cheap lamp. So, a couple of weeks ago, I rented the movie Patton because I like war movies. I like war movies not because I like war, but because war movies are just interesting and cool, and I'm kind of an aficionado of war movies. And I rented Patton because when Patton came out, I was about 7 years old and I didn't see it. And then it's one of those things like, it was kind of low priority to see Patton over the years. And since I'm kind of trying to see like a cycle of war movies that I didn't see. One war movie that I really like, that I highly recommend, if you're into this kind of stuff, right? It's very arcane, but I'm into it. One movie that I really like is called Murphy's War, and it's with Peter O'Toole. And it's about Peter O'Toole being out in the boonies somewhere, I can't remember why, and he's with his wife, and it's during World War II, and a German submarine gets stranded in a small river, and he finds it, and Peter O'Toole's character is named Murphy, and the war is between this German submarine that's trying to get away, and Murphy, who's trying to kill it, or capture it, or disable it with crazy shit, like he makes catapults and stuff and tries to hurl stuff at it or net it or trap it. I can't remember, but it's totally preposterous and it's a great movie. And Peter O'Toole is wonderful. And these old Hollywood actors are just great. George C. Scott is the lead actor in Patton, and he's just in his gloria. He's fantastic. Even if you don't like the movie, he was a great actor that I don't think got his full due. I think he was pretty interesting. He was in this movie in the early 80s, where his daughter ran away to the big city and got caught up in some kind of, anyway, I don't go into that. But, so I was watching Patton, and there was this one scene where Patton, George C. Scott as Patton, is driving in a Jeep. They're in Europe, and they're driving to a battle, or the aftermath of a battle, so he can analyze it. And he says to the driver, "Go here." And the driver says, "But sir, the war, the battleground that we are examining is over here." And he goes, "That's an order. Go here, or I'll slap you." He didn't say that. He slapped someone later in the movie, and evidently that was a big thing during World War II, actually. So anyway, they go to this battleground that the driver is sort of like, "What are we doing here?" Patton gets out of the car and he walks around and like puts his hands on his hips and he goes, "I was here. I was here." And then he tells the driver that it's the site of a Roman battle that happened about 2,000 years ago. And he goes on and on and on about it. And then the driver says to him something like, "Well, how do you know all this?" And he goes, "Because I know because I was here." And then the movie goes on, and it's a good movie, actually. And if you like old war movies and you're going through arcane shit and looking at old war movies, I don't know what I'm going to look at next. Yeah, I'll have to think about it. If you have any recommendations, let me know. So then I started thinking about, I was thinking about this many years ago in guitar making, like 20 years ago. Like, why does everybody want to make a Torres guitar? And I was like, I understand that Torres is like the maker, that in Spanish guitar making, this is the guy that you want to begin with to look at. I mean, mostly, right? You want to understand it profoundly. And I thought, over the years, every once in a while I thought, well, I should just like make a Torres guitar. But then I thought, you know, to be honest, if we're really being honest, how many of us actually get to handle enough Torres guitars to really understand like what he was doing? We get to look at pictures. A dealer that does very high-end repair work has confidentially sent me some interior shots from Torres guitars, which I highly appreciate. But says, you know, you can never show these to anybody. This is private client, etc., etc. It's a really rarefied world in a way. It's difficult to see a whole bunch of them in one place, or just over time to see a whole bunch of them. But this is a book that's written by Jose Romanillos called Antonio Torres, Guitar Maker, His Life and Work. It's a fantastic book. It's a great study. And it's probably like the catalogue raison. How do you say that? Raisonner or raison? Catalogue raisonner. If anybody can like, you know, help me out with that, let me know. I don't want to do French words in an ignorant way, right? What's really ignorant. So I want to read something from this book. It's like, this is not a Bible study, don't worry. I'm just going to read a paragraph out of this book. In 1854, Torres was making guitars in the house at 11 Calle Ballestilla, which was situated only a few hundred yards from Calle Cerrajeria, to which he moved in 1856. Torres had probably selected that district intentionally because it was in those narrow streets converging into Calle Carpenteria, where many a woodworker and several guitar makers had had shops throughout the centuries. The name Carpenteria, Carpenter's Street, had its origin in the carpenters' guilds, whose hospital was a few hundred yards away. In 1839, according to Gonzalez de Leon, there were still many guitar makers in that street, some of whom would be making guitars side by side with Torres a few years later. So I kind of fudged the Spanish names. I didn't practice them ahead of time. But so we're talking about a street in the town of Sevilla in Andalusia where Torres moved to kind of begin the main part of his first epoch of being a professional maker. So he goes to the, it says he gets a shop on the Calle Cerrajeria, and it kind of converges into a street called Calle Carpenteria. Now I stayed in Sevilla for an extended period of time about 15 years ago. And I know these streets, I walked on these streets, and I know Sevilla pretty well because I spent 7 weeks there. I rented a place and I walked around, and I know the city, you know, as a walker knows the city, which according to Pico Iyer, the great travel writer, is the best way to see a city. I mean, anybody who travels knows that. So I got to thinking, like, many years ago, I had this idea that let's build a Torres guitar. And then I thought, but, like, so we're being honest, like, you know, I don't know enough about real ones. I haven't been able to spend 7 weeks with a Torres guitar or with a few Torres guitars. People are really lucky if they can do that. But I have seen a lot of guitars that are from Spain from that time period. So I thought last year, this is what I'm going to do. Because I've read Romanios's book, I spent time in Sevilla, I walked on those streets, I saw the millstones that they cement into the walls in the Barrio Santa Cruz. I studied the Roman history of Sevilla. I looked around. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just make a model of guitar that could have been made by a guitar maker that had that had a guitar shop or worked in a shop on the Calle Carpenteria. And the reason when I read this passage in this book, I connected with it and I said, yes, this is me, because before I became a full-time guitar maker, I was a carpenter. I mean, my grandfather was a carpenter. And my dad was a fuck up, but that's a whole different story. He couldn't hammer a nail if his life depended on it. But fortunately, I mean, I'll talk about him sometime. He's a very interesting character. But my grandfather was a really masterful carpenter, and I'm not a masterful carpenter. I'm a good carpenter. He was a very great master. But so I decided this is kind of in the family. My grandfather's father was the first licensed electrician in the city of Los Angeles. I don't know diddly about electricity. I'd get myself killed if I tried to do electricity. But so I said, I'm going to just go like the Patton route, and I'm going to say, I'm not going to be like Patton, right? I'm not going to go, I was here. But I walked on those streets and I got a whiff of it, and I thought, you know what? My model for that time period of guitar is going to be called the Calle Carpenteria model. And I'm not going to build replicas or copies or anything that has to do with Torres, but I'm going to build the Torres style guitar that the guys in that neighborhood understood in the 1850s. I mean, Torres got the main credit for everything, but I mean, if we're being honest, that thing was kind of in the air in that neighborhood, what he was doing. And he just happened to be the guy that was a kind of, I don't know, maybe genius is overused, but he walked into the right situation at the right time, and he was a really, really astute guy, really smart, and he just did what he did. And important musicians started picking up on it, and this is how we got the Torres guitar. But when I saw Patton and he went into that Roman battlefield and he went into this whole thing, I was just like, this is freaking great, because it's just like, I was there. And so I thought, like, this just reinforces my idea that I want to build the guitar that has the aroma. It just comes from that time period, from studying and looking at those guitars. But I don't want to call it a Torres guitar, because when we're being honest, I haven't handled enough Torres guitars to know. But what I do know is that I studied Santos really carefully, and I studied Manuel de la Chica really carefully, because when I lived in San Francisco, I had access to those guitars. I had a lot of access to those guitars. I had a lot of access to Manuel Reyes's guitars. I mean, I had access, like I could borrow one from a player that I know really well and keep it in my shop for a couple weeks and look at it. I mean, I intimately know those guitars. And they are in the lineage of Torres. I mean, so I think that I really, and I've seen a lot of old guitars. I've seen guitars by people from the 19th century. So what I'm doing is I'm not making a Torres guitar. The Calle Carpenteria guitar is just me saying, I'm making a smaller guitar that's based on the aesthetic and the plantilla and the things they were thinking about at that time. Most of them have pegs. I'll make them with tuners, but I really want to make them with pegs. And the body size is, I don't know if you can see this, the body size is a little bit smaller. The body size is a little smaller than a full-size guitar. The body is 18.5 inches long, and it's 13 inches wide. And this particular one that I'm building now has a tornavas. So it's like, you know, standard operating equipment for that time period. And I went with this headstock because it's it was kind of in the air on the Calle Carpenteria and in that guitar making area of Sevilla at the time. And it's also kind of a variation on an early Torres guitar, but the other guitar makers had similar looking things. So these guitars have rosettes that would have been, you know, traditional rosettes that probably would have worked in those times. And these guitars just have a more old-fashioned kind of vibe to them. That's what the deal is. And if anybody wants one and they have a specific idea, they want to work with this model to do something, I'm totally open to it. Like, you know, put Rogers tuners on it or make it out of ziricote or something, you know, whatever you want to do. But other than that, I'm just making these as, I'm producing these in cypress and rosewood, and mostly they're being requested by Martin Falk Guitars, who's in Sweden, and he has the most right now he has the most comprehensive shop in Scandinavia, I believe. So he likes these kind of guitars. He's a master guitar player. He likes playing this kind of stuff. I like building it. So he has a lot of other makers too. He's got fantastic stuff at his shop. He's got all the best stuff. I wish I could do a Donald Trump imitation, but it'd probably make me vomit. I can't do it. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about this model, talk about war movies, give the acknowledgement to Master Romanios for his scholarship, and just sit in my chair and bullshit in my shop, because I live in the middle of nowhere and nobody comes to see me ever. So I'm like, you know, I'm just sitting here all by myself. My shop has a room you can sleep on a futon if you want to come to Japan and pick up your guitar. Otherwise, I'll just send it to you in the mail. You can come here and go fishing if you want. We can go fishing. All right, until next time.